Hello, this is Jennifer Warrens, and you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. It's one thing when neighbors don't like that butterfly mother-in-law shed in your backyard, but it's another when thousands of people in a city are without housing and neighborhoods don't want them anywhere close. Over the decades, architecture has proclaimed that the solution to this and other social problems can be solved through design. But as Dr. Phil might ask,
how'd that work out?
Not so well, as large mid-century public housing projects proved over and over. Today, however, there are new approaches and new understandings of both public policy and design that hold great promise. Joining us today are Andrea Urton. She's the CEO of HomeFirst Services, a Silicon Valley agency supporting housing the homeless. She's joined by architect Michael Lehrer of Los Angeles. Later on from the Lone Star State, jazz vocalist Rosana Eckert will be on. And here's your host, who's not yet been homeless, but has been speechless, breathless, restless, and pointless, George Smart.
Thank you, Tom. And don't forget clueless and fearless.
Okay.
Often found in the exact same behaviors. Like the time I flew 1,200 miles to meet the woman of my dreams for what I thought was surely a date, and it absolutely, positively wasn't. You might ask, how could you not see that, George? Well, love is blind, clueless, and fearless. Or the time I started a salad dressing company for the human resource profession. You might reasonably ask, why do those fine people in HR need a salad dressing? Specifically, a very tasty vinaigrette.
Yeah.
And the answer is they absolutely do not.
Oh, okay.
Clueless and fearless. Or the time I watched professional poker on TV and said to myself, how hard can that be? Turns out, pretty hard.
Yeah.
You get the pattern. We learn important lessons and move on. Support for U.S. Modernist Radio comes from Wendy Robineau and Don Beskin, and by modernist realtor Angela Roll.
In our continuing space saga, it's Episode 3, Revenge of the Developers. The modernist homeworld, Bjarke, is crumbling from deferred maintenance. The Farnsworth House, moved from Earth 3,000 years ago, because the damn river flooded again, is now an IHOP promoting all-you-can-eat bergilium pancakes.
Yum.
Desperate for cash, the modernists sell one of the planet's moons to Home Depot to be converted into a galactic superstore. Under attack by ruthless Republic developer Lady Ivanka, the 14th, and her evil consort, Ted, modernist Senator Angela Roll sweeps into the Republic Capitol and replaces all of the dilithium energy crystals with Folgers crystals. Initially, of course, no one can tell the difference, but as the Republic's power source shuts down, a rich, pleasing Colombian aroma covers the planet, saving the day. Senator Angela Roll flees inside an IKEA freighter on a mission to serve tasty meatballs and sell sturdy furniture across the galaxy. Back here on Earth, Senator Angela's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother, realtor Angela Roll, uses her architectural training to specialize in modernist real estate, advising buyers and sellers on everything from appropriate renovation to getting the IKEA employee discount. Angela Roll is your special real estate agent. Reach her at angelaroll.com. That's ROEHL, or call her at 919-995-0550.
Thank you, Tom. The architecture profession has tried for 70-plus years to present modernist design as the solution to social change, whether it's public housing, urban sprawl, or housing the homeless. The federal government, for decades, provided billions to build public housing, most of it modernist, in most major cities. The idea was to take all the poor people, which generally meant people of color, and herd them into large buildings. The slums were gone. The socially disadvantaged had a nice place to live. Seems like a great plan, right? Cities and states were then responsible for running things after that. And surprise, surprise, few cities had the money or the political will to maintain these projects properly or provide the infrastructure and sustainability any community needs, like stores, schools, daycare, healthcare, places of worship, and most importantly, jobs. Basically, this scheme was just warehousing people. Architecture, which beat its mostly male chest during the 60s, stopped boasting in the 70s as these communities frequently fell apart. Many housing blocks, like the infamous Pruitt-Igoe project in St. Louis, were eventually abandoned, then destroyed. Then, starting in the 1980s, Republican-led federal cuts to mental health programs and states unwilling to pick up that bill started an outpouring of all but the most severely mentally ill into the streets. And then we all started to hear about a new national issue, homelessness.
Homelessness is hard enough for those affected. What we don't fully realize is how it affects everyone and everything, from healthcare to education to public safety. Specifically, the homeless problem in California has reached crisis levels not seen since the Depression. But homelessness is in the bloodstream of every major city. Despite years of initiatives, systemic racism, indifference, relentlessly rising real estate values, this year COVID-19, and an unfortunate but common belief that homeless people brought it all on themselves and don't deserve any kind of free ride.
Our first guest today is someone who fights this battle every day. Andrea Urton from San Jose, California, is CEO of HomeFirst Services of Santa Clara County, a provider of services, shelter, and housing opportunities to the county's homeless. Before that, she was COO for Alumrock Counseling Center, a clinical director for EMQ Family First, and a lecturer for the Santa Clara University. She sits on the boards of Hunger at Home and Legacy Alviso. Is that how you say that?
Yes, correct.
And she was recognized as the 2018 Woman of Influence by the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Welcome, Andrea.
Hi, thank you, George. Thank you, Tom.
Born and raised in Los Angeles, Michael Lehrer is the founding partner of Lehrer Architects LA. His firm's design work is grounded in the idea that beauty is a rudiment of human dignity. He is an AIA Fellow, and his firm won the gold medal from AIA Los Angeles. Michael is Chairman Emeritus of the Harvard Graduate School of Design Alumni Council, where he created a leadership manifesto, the Engagement Party, which is now a centerpiece of GSD's 14,000-member community. Among other appointments, he is a past president of Homeless Healthcare Los Angeles, a board on which he still serves. Welcome, Michael.
Nice to be here.
So, Andrea, before we get started, I did not know until our ACE research team told me last week that you are a small plane pilot.
I am not. I don't know where they got that.
Oh.
I am not.
Oh, I've seen photos of you flying a plane.
Well, that was my boyfriend's plane, and for a moment, I had the stick.
Oh, I've done that before, yeah. Here, while we're flying level, hold this for a second while I take your picture.
Exactly.
Now land us.
And the rest is history.
Right.
Where did you fly to?
We've flown all over the place, down to Watsonville, around San Francisco. There's a little town called Columbia we like to go to. Mostly my boyfriend right now is a soaring pilot, so we don't have the opportunity for lots of flying together because it's a single-seater.
Oh, what is that kind of plane?
It's a plane without an engine, basically. So another plane tows you up. You get to the altitude of your desire, and they release the rope, and you look for air. You look for wave. You fly.
Oh, the gliders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And updrafts are important.
Yes.
And I remember you have to bank the little plane in a certain way to catch those updrafts, right?
You do. Yes, they're called thermals.
Yeah.
Thermals.
And it's really quiet.
Oh, it's so amazing. It's silent. There's no engine, so everything's quiet. You look over and there's birds soaring with you. It's just really, really cool.
Well, that's pretty neat. That is pretty neat. And Michael, a quick question for you. In the engagement party, is there a ring involved? Did you have to marry someone for this? What was going on?
Well, it's funny. I guess I hadn't quite thought of it in those terms, but I guess I did since I met my wife on the first day we set on campus 45 years ago, and I proposed to her within 6 months. So there you go. I guess it really was an engagement party for me. And and one of the big ideas of building our community is anytime you have at least two members of the alumni community together, you have an alumni event. So we actually have alumni events at our house every day and every night.
That's pretty cool.
So what is a party?
Party?
I'm assuming it's not a party.
Well, no, although it's close enough that the association is nice. Partie is a French word, which I don't know if it's necessarily used in every school of architecture, but it's from the École des Beaux-Arts, the School of Fine Arts, which was really probably the dominant school in the late 19th century in Paris. And the partie is the concept. So it's the overarching architectural concept in a design. And
okay.
And it's a word that not everybody, but many, including myself, use when we crack the design, and we've gotten to that core idea.
Sounds classy.
Yes. Anything a little French sounds classy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Andrea, you are CEO of a major agency in Silicon Valley, but you also experienced homelessness personally growing up. What was that like?
I did. Well, it was terrifying. I was a teenager, and in high school, I worked full-time for the most part at Kentucky Fried Chicken, which was down the street from the apartment that I had been staying in. My home just was no longer safe for me to be there. So I did what a lot of teenagers do when they're in situations like that. I couch surfed. I did a lot of couch surfing. I would go from home to home, make myself useful. I would do laundry. I would cook. I would clean, be super respectful, anything I could do to stay for a little while. And I was lucky. There were 3 mothers, single mothers of my girlfriends who allowed me to stay for periods of time.
You were very lucky. I mean, it could have turned out much worse.
I was incredibly lucky. And so when we talk about homelessness, I'm always very clear. I have never spent one night in a shelter as a homeless individual. That was not my journey. I was scared. There were times I slept in my car. There were times I didn't have food to eat. But I was one of the lucky ones, and I was able to figure my way out and get out. But I was able to get out with a lot of assistance. I didn't do it on my own.
How long were you couch surfing and car sleeping?
On and off for probably about 3 years.
Wow.
And then about a month before I graduated high school, my father owned the apartment that I was staying in, and he came home and told me he had sold it. And I had to be out in a matter of days.
Oh, that's not good.
And I slept in my car again for a few more nights until I found a room to rent.
Do people recognize that personal experience that you've had when you talk with them, people who are actually on the street or living in shelters?
Yeah, I've actually I've been starting to share my story a little more freely now. It's not something I've done till recently. And the people that we serve are always so gracious, and many of them say, "Oh, no wonder you get it. Oh, no wonder you're so kind. No wonder you're so empathetic." I really approach the work with no shaming and no blaming, and we understand that everybody is in different spaces in their lives, and everybody has different skill sets. And so a lot of the people we serve are lacking skill sets, and so we do the best we can to figure out what they are and then educate around that and help them develop the skill sets they need to get housed and stay permanently housed.
What's the scale of the homeless problem in Silicon Valley, Andrea, approximately?
Well, I can speak for Santa Clara County. It's at least 10,000 homeless people a night.
Wow.
In the state of California, we've got a little over 151,000 homeless individuals. And in the nation, we've got over 500,000. We've got 550,000 people who are homeless on our streets as a nation.
But for California to have 150 out of 550, that's a huge chunk.
It is. It is. And it speaks to the high cost of housing and the unavailability of housing. Here in Silicon Valley, we have a vacancy rate of approximately 2 to 2.5%.
Wow. And, with COVID-19 and everybody being told to shelter at home, that's simply a contradiction in terms for these people.
It is. It
What do they do?
Is. They hunker down in their encampments. We have outreach teams that go out into the encampments. We take sleeping bags and blankets and hygiene kits. We also work with a group of nurses and doctors, and once we've identified somebody who needs medical care, we take them with us. We take the nurses and doctors with us into the encampments to treat the people. We provide therapy and case management and drug and alcohol support in the encampments as well.
Michael, you've had a lot of direct contact with the homeless as well.
Yes.
Tell us about that. You've done quite a bit of really direct interaction in understanding what their lives are like and how to get them housed.
Yeah, well, my engagement with the community and people who are unhoused, live on the street, began about 21 years ago when I designed the downtown homeless drop-in shelter in Skid Row. And it was a pretty radical project at the time. And it was for people who lived on the street, a respite. We had showers, a laundry, a clubhouse. It was centered around a courtyard. There was no gate on it for the first 3 years. It's where I began. The philosophy which was of that institution and which I've come to share is the notion of harm reduction, which is basically you meet people, as Andrea said, you basically meet people where they're at with no judgment. And since then, a few other projects in Skid Row. I've been on as you mentioned, the board and past president of an organization called Homeless Healthcare Los Angeles, when we provide healthcare and training and supportive services and that full range of things. And then in the last few years, we're doing everything from shelters. We've completed 2 and are doing 3 or 4 more. And we're doing about 10 projects for the currently houseless. But when these projects are built, projects from anywhere from 8 to 40 units. We have a team called Rethink Housing, which has a nonprofit developer, a community bank, and ourselves. And we actually just got a job the other day from LA County, which will be taking some existing motels and converting them into housing. So what's interesting is that from providing drop-in centers for people who are houseless on the street to homes for very rich people, and we've done the full gamut, the design exercise is the same, and the value systems are the same. I mean, every human being needs certain basics from their environment, and each of these projects inform the other. So for us, it's an exciting and rewarding time to be doing important work in this time and to have the full range of architecture. And it also really helps illuminate, what the value of architecture is and can be.
Andrea, when I look back at the 80s, beyond the spandex, I remember a time when homeless were really talked about as a problem to be sheltered primarily. When did it start to turn to actually housing the homeless?
We had a movement probably about 10 years ago when people realized the way to actually solve homelessness wasn't just to shelter people. It was to actually house them. Let's give them a place to live. You mentioned in the 80s, Ronald Reagan closed down a lot of the institutions where a lot of people who were severely mentally ill were living. And unfortunately, when those places were closed, they weren't given really any alternatives. Yeah. And those people went to the streets. Many of those people are still on the streets today. Those are our chronically homeless individuals, and those are the people who are most vulnerable.
And I can't imagine that living on the street stabilizes your mental acuity much.
It does not. There is a pretty rapid rate of decompensation. If somebody isn't able to get housed within the first 30, 60, or 90 days, there often is a rapid decompensation. And by that I mean health issues, mental health issues, trauma. Within 4 hours of becoming homeless, a woman is likely to be approached for either a sexual favor, raped, or assaulted in some way. 4 hours.
4 hours?
Wow.
Yes.
And
it's dangerous out there.
Holy cow. What is the mix of male to female now in the population generally of homeless?
It's about 70-30 male, 70-30 female.
Okay.
And we're not quite sure why that is.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think, just my own perspective, women tend to gather together and create really fierce bonds. So my assumption is there's probably more female homelessness out there, but they're probably hunkered down living in some warehouse somewhere together.
Oh, so it's really not on the radar.
Probably.
The Reagan administration, kicked these people out of shelters. Why did they think they were there in the first place? They wanted to be? The thinking behind this just escapes me.
It escaped me at the time, and I was a kid, and I was thinking, well, that's kind of nuts. And yet the decision was made to deinstitutionalize spaces. That was the big movement at the time. And unfortunately, it created a mass population of homeless people.
I guess they just thought they'd go out and get a job and then get an apartment? That was that simple?
Or maybe family members would take them in, care for them.
Yeah.
Again, it was one of those things that the states were supposed to pick up the responsibilities for this. And state legislatures were also defunding a lot of these things, too, at the time. That was prevailing.
Well, I think there was also a sensibility, which was that if you were in bad straits, it was your fault. You must have done something wrong.
Yeah.
And people for whom life has, took a bad turn, which at some point is virtually everyone, were stigmatized by it and in many ways for a long time dehumanized because of that.
Yes.
So besides government policy, we also have a prevailing force out there called NIMBY.
Yeah.
Andrea, tell us what NIMBY stands for.
Not in my backyard.
And how is that affecting the movement to help the homeless?
Well, it's a huge impact, unfortunately. It stops us from getting things done on a regular basis. We've opened several emergency interim housing sites during the course of the pandemic, which is just an amazing feat. And we were able to do this because Gavin Newsom released some of the restrictions on letting the community know and letting the community have a say. We started a bridge housing project. The mayor likes to call it tiny homes, about 5 years ago. It took us 4 years to get that built. Here in the pandemic, it took us 3 months to get 78 units up and running with shared living spaces. 3 months.
Wow.
Pretty amazing.
I think that's been I don't want to say an upside, but a few of the outcomes of COVID is that things which seemed to be impossible all of a sudden became possible because we are in a universal emergency. And even the notion of being sheltered at home puts a focus on home and housing and frankly, I would say on architecture, because to shelter at home, you have to have a home. And it begs the question of people living on the street and getting each other sick, let alone, or people living in crummy places and being stuck there for a year versus places which are not crummy and nice and maybe even very nice. And I'm not talking about luxurious. I'm just talking about nice, light air, fresh air, and so forth. And I think that the openness, because of this emergency, it sort of changed the perspective of things. Things which seemed impossible are no longer impossible. Things which seemed horrible are not nearly as horrible as these new crises and threats we're facing. And in California in general, and certainly as well in Southern California and in Los Angeles, there's an urgency about doing things and getting things built. I mean, certain types of buildings, as urgent as they are, buildings just take a long time. We've just completed, in fact, this afternoon we're going to photograph it. It's because it's just finishing. The first tiny homes, they're called pallet homes, our first tiny home shelter in L.A., and we just completed it. It was 13 weeks from when we got our contract. We actually started designing before we got the contract signed to completion of construction. And there, too, I mean, political leadership is really important because this is the first project. There are expenses involved and discoveries made. And, when you do beta projects, when you try things out, you'll get some things right and you'll get some things wrong. And you need to make it safe to learn from the things that you've done wrong as opposed to be stigmatized and brought down. And that's sort of where we're at right now and in a good way, I think.
13 weeks seems pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
It's darn fast.
From
Well,
scratch.
as Andrea will attest, I mean, these tiny homes, the homes themselves go up in a matter of hours. It's the infrastructure and the site work which actually takes all the time and which actually costs the big bucks, and which depends on what city ordinances and environmental codes, et cetera, and ADA codes do you have to pay a premium to oblige, and which is there a possibility of not doing to save money and save time.
Now, Andrea, I understand there's a small but growing movement led by young people mostly called YIMBY, the opposite of NIMBY. Oh. Do you see that in Silicon Valley?
I do. Not as much as I'd like to, but I do. I'm working with a group of people in San Francisco right now who are very much YIMBYs, and they are actually advocating for an emergency interim housing site in their neighborhood.
So is that you're in my backyard?
Yes.
Oh, it is?
Yes, in my backyard.
Yes, in my backyard.
Oh, okay. Sounds good.
I think that speaks to the importance of design. I think that the attitude has to be that it's critical that these projects enhance the neighborhoods into which they are put, so that people will they will become places of desire. And if you think about folks in, let's say, in fancy neighborhoods, there's some cachet. Well, of course, you don't have a place that houses the formerly houseless in your neighborhood. Well, I do. I'm a good person, and we're a good community. I mean, I think that every one of these projects has the burden appropriately of being contextual, of enhancing the neighborhood. A better word would be in completing neighborhoods, that the culture evolves, that every complete neighborhood really has the full range of citizens in it, from people who used to live on the street to people who have been housed in homes for, forever.
81% of the homeless individuals in a specific neighborhood either lived there upon becoming homeless or are from that neighborhood. So I think when we give information that breaks down the myths and the fallacies around homelessness, it's important for people. I think it helps them gain a better understanding and makes them more open to having one of these facilities in their neighborhood.
Yep.
Andrea, tell us about the tiny home community you've been working on that's going to provide 40 individuals a respectful and dignified break.
Well, that's the Bridge Housing site that we opened, I want to say last February in San Jose. We've got another one coming live next month that we're very excited about. These are little sleeping cabins. Mayor likes to call them tiny homes, but they do not have plumbing. They've got a door, a window, electricity, heating, and cooling. They've got a desk, a bed, a chair. They've got minimal storage, and they're beautiful. It just, when you walk onto the site, which is all fenced, it looks like you're entering a little city. There's a dog park. We have raised garden beds for people to do gardening. We have a shower, bathroom, and laundry truck. Not a truck, a trailer. And then we have another building that's for the kitchen, the pantry, and offices. We also have 24/7 security
that's great.
So that
That's
they can keep an eye on the site.
Yeah,
it's very important.
Where is it?
It's on Mawberry, across from the Berryessa Flea Market. So it's accessible to the bus line, and it's accessible to, anything they could need in the community.
That's great. How big are the houses?
They're actually 80 square feet.
That's
okay.
Tiny.
So they're small.
Yeah, but you can do a lot in 80 square feet, really.
Mm-hmm.
You can. And they're tall. They have very tall ceilings with a skylight. So the whole appearance is very bright, very welcoming. And again, just like your site, everything is movable. So they're not on foundations. The whole site can be picked up and moved to another location.
Now, was this the first of its type, Andrea?
It was. We're very excited. The governor came out to see them, I want to say, at the end of February. Mm-hmm. And then he was very pleased. He also came out to our emergency interim housing site, which is similar, but they look more like shipping containers, and each modular unit has 4 units inside, and these actually do have plumbing. So each unit is 120 square feet with their own bathroom.
And how do people, once they get housing, how do they start to work on their long-term plan in terms of either getting education or getting employment or if they're very disabled, getting the right benefits to help them live the rest of their lives? How do they go about doing that?
Well, a lot of people don't have it to begin with because our systems are challenging and they don't allow for a lot of support, and they're arduous to work within. So the second somebody is checked into our facility, they're assigned a case manager or a housing specialist, and we also have therapeutic services on site for those who need it, and then drug and alcohol. But we just start working right away with the individual. What's your housing plan? What is it that you want to achieve? Is there a vocation that you want to learn? Some people are on disability or Social Security or retirement. They don't have the ability to increase their income. So we do what we can with them. We help them understand how to recycle to get extra money or how to do odd jobs to get extra money. And that way, when they are placed permanently, they're able to maintain that housing. And it's not necessarily in an apartment all by themselves. We do a lot of shared housing for people. The average rent on a one-bedroom here is $3,000 a month.
Wow.
So it's very expensive. Yeah, and that's affordable, believe it or not.
Wow. Do you have, I don't quite know how to ask this, but do you have any feel for how many people in the country are alumni of homelessness who were homeless, like yourself, and now live, stably in a home? I mean,
that's a great question.
Do you understand what I'm asking?
I do not.
Yeah.
I do, because many people the average unhoused person is temporarily homeless. They're like me. They have bouts of 30 or 60 days here and there, maybe 90, a couple of months, but they're able to resolve their issue. The challenge is it gets more expensive to move into a place. The average security deposit here in Silicon Valley with first month is around $5,000.
Yeah.
So you have
incredible.
to be able to save that. And if you're working at Starbucks or Subway, how are you going to save that in a matter of months?
Right. Have they raised the minimum wage out there yet? Is it $15?
We're working on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we have that in Los Angeles, although even at $15, it's not going to get you that far in terms of housing. I mean, I think another thing attitudinally, though, is to just imagine whether it was in your life or your parents' lives or your grandparents' lives, someone was homeless or a refugee or something at some point. And it's more than destigmatizing. It's there are people who are houseless who, when housed, will eventually find their way to being more productive and fulfilled. There are other people who won't. I mean, as Andy said, they have their problems, but they're as fully human as everybody else, and they need to be taken care of and respected. And, maybe, again, one of the outcomes of the crisis, and maybe with a new attitude in our country, realizing that we're all in this together and, here but for the grace of God go any of us.
Yeah.
Michael, when did you realize you would be an architect? I understand that you were 8 years old and there was a girl involved.
Well, actually, that's true, and love has always had something to do with it. Love of architecture and love of people, and love of, in this case, girls. In third grade, this girl I had a crush on brought in blueprints of a high school her father designed, and I looked at them, and then I just said, that's what I'm going to do, and I never changed my mind. I discovered Frank Lloyd Wright shortly thereafter and would look longingly at his drawings and, would start trying to mimic his line weight in buildings and printing, and that was it. And I'm just extremely fortunate that my passion and that I have enough skills that I could actually spend my life pursuing and fulfilling my calling. That's a long shot for anybody. So I'm very blessed in that way.
And you recently participated in a Harvard Zoom conference called Straight Up Talk Homelessness.
Yes.
And framed that homelessness is a problem that's too large for architecture alone to solve, which I think is a very refreshing point of view, as in the past, architecture has said, no problem, we can take care of all of it. Yeah,
well, it is. I mean, frankly, homelessness is probably too big a problem for any singular discipline or, a single attribute of the culture to solve. But on one hand, on the other hand, I think having an attitude that, places where we house people should honor the human beings, should honor the communities that they are put into, should enhance community, and should have, as Andrea was talking about, the little house project, I think every one of these projects has to have an appealing sense of community. And as you quoted in your introduction, for me and in my practice in our work, the notion that beauty is a attribute or a rudiment of human dignity is something I believe to my core. And actually, that became clear to me when I was in the latter phases of construction of a second project in Skid Row 20 years ago. And I'm looking at some colors going up onto the building, and someone who was clearly living on the street comes up to me and says, you have to come here when the clouds are behind those columns because it's so beautiful. And, one of the best comments and compliments I've gotten in my career as an architect, and people get it. People get it when you create places that respect them and honor their humanity. And people who, at the bottom of the social ladder, people without anything else, it has even more impact. Like, you made this special thing for me? That's good, because, the restoration of a sense of dignity, of a sense of autonomy and an agency, those are, the things that people who've been houseless are have not had a lot of, and the beginning of restoring that to them, which architecture can do, is really important.
Andrea, whether a person lives in Santa Clara County or not, how can they help you? I think what you're doing is amazing, and I'd like to know how people can reach you and support your effort.
Oh, that is wonderful. Thank you. Well, we have a website, www.homefirstSCC.org, and you can hop onto the website and make a donation whenever you like.
Okay. And in terms of other resources, like what do you need there to get more of these units up? What kind of political support do you need? Do you need like truckloads of towels? What do you need?
That's lovely. Number one, we need people to vote yes. When issues around housing and additional projects come up, either at city council meetings or board of supervisor meetings for projects, we need people to be open-minded and to say yes to the project.
Yep.
So that's the number one thing we need. We also need people to write letters to their representatives at state level and at the federal level and say, hey, we need more housing and we have to do it now and we have to do it quickly. And finally, we have a whole list on our website of items that we need, and you can always purchase them on Amazon. We have links and then ship them to us. Many of them are blankets, towels, socks are a big thing, underwear of all sizes for men and women. And then sweatsuits are important because when people come to any of our facilities, they need to do laundry right away.
Yeah.
And so they need to wash everything. And so we have to give them a brand new, clean set of clothing that they can wear.
So they don't have to do laundry naked.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Well,
we prefer that they don't.
Yes. And I bet they prefer that too.
Yes. You have to go to a totally different agency to get that.
Yes.
Right.
That's another story.
Well, Andrea, Michael, thank you so much for joining us. This is a really important issue, and it sounds like you both are making some progress on it.
Yeah.
Thank you. A pleasure.
Well, you're very welcome. Yes, pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much.
Texas native Rosana Eckert is an enchanting vocalist, poetic songwriter, and master jazz instructor. She began singing while studying music and the French horn at the University of North Texas, where she is now principal lecturer of vocal jazz, where she's taught for the last 21 years. Rosana's performed with the greats such as Christian McBride, Bobby McFerrin, Kenny Wheeler, George Duke, Marvin Stamm, and the New York Voices. Besides touring, Rosana is a studio vocalist, producer, and voiceover actor. Her albums include At the End of the Day, Small Hotel, and Sailing Home. She is the author of Singing with Expression, a guide to authentic and adventurous song interpretation, which is an encyclopedic volume for contemporary singers. Welcome, Rosana.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So, Rosana, help me out here. You've heard our theme song. what do I need to work on next in my burgeoning vocal career?
I think you're doing a fabulous job. I wouldn't change a thing.
Oh, you're so nice. You're so nice. Well, given that's the only song that I have sung or recorded, I guess I have to now pick some new material.
Well, I bet you've sung a bit, but we've only caught you once.
Yeah,
that
that's
I know
true.
Of.
I know. You're probably in the shower singing, in your car.
Right? I just come in here and sing for Tom, and he puts up with it.
Whistle while you work.
Yeah. Have you, in your instruction, had to move a lot of work online during COVID? How has that affected jazz instruction at the University of North Texas?
We have. Yeah, there's been quite a bit of movement to online, but we are also doing quite a bit of hybrid teaching. And so with some really great leadership and some clear guidelines in terms of masking and social distancing and cleaning supplies in every classroom and every student cleaning their desk off, after they use it, I'm able to teach quite a bit in person. So all of my classes thus far, in general, have been in person since going back to school this year. When the pandemic first hit and we all went online initially, that was a big adjustment. But then I've been able to go back for quite a bit. And then I do a lot of private lessons on Zoom.
Okay.
And it works all right. We make it work.
I've seen on the news a number of these choirs getting themselves sick from COVID. So if you're doing this live, what do you do? Do you have to get like a really big room and put people in the corners?
Well, I don't direct a choir, but my colleagues do. And what they have to do is any group that has wind-producing instruments, like a wind instrument or a voice, any kind of wind instrument, they have to wear a mask or a cover on the bell of their horn. They have to be 12 feet apart from their neighbor, and they're only allowed to make sound for 30 minutes in a room, and then they have to move rooms. So we have to share the largest rooms in the building. And so they don't get as much rehearsal time. So what they'll do is they'll rehearse for 30 minutes and then they'll move to a smaller space and do sectional, maybe just a handful of students, moving to a new space, and all the trombones will work in this one large classroom. And the same with the singers. The altos will all go over to this one room and they'll work for the other 30 minutes of the time. And maybe every other day they use software like Soundtrap or things like that, where they can record all together and sync their tracks together and hear the ensemble once they've synced their tracks together.
Yeah, you see so much of this on television where you have little boxes of different musicians and singers at home, I guess, who are cooperating. And from what little I know about recording,
right,
what I've picked up over the years, syncing all of that, getting everybody like on the beat has got to be a challenge. And I salute people who figured out that little headache. It works.
Right. Yeah, the simultaneous aspect is not something that is really feasible. They can't all sing at the same time over Zoom or something like that.
Yeah.
But they can record their parts individually and upload them to a shared project folder.
Right.
And then play them all together and see how it sounds and learn from that. And there's a lot of benefit to doing that. That's how a lot of professional music is made these days, actually.
Yep.
So, it is kind of skill building for the future.
This first song is Meant for Me, written by Rosana and her husband Gary Eckert from the album Sailing Home. This song and the next one we'll be playing later, what strikes me about these two is that they kind of sound like I've heard them before, like they're jazz standards. I think that's one of the most marvelous things about the compositions that you've been writing, Rosana, is they just sound timeless already.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you.
This is Rosana Eckert and Meant for Me.
To the wind I sent a prayer for a love to call my own. In your eyes I found an answer. In your arms I found a home. In your hands my heart did open with a trust forever true, and a vision gold and glorious of a lifetime filled with you. But the future could not hold us, for the winds did elsewhere blow to a space for me of sadness, and a place you chose to go. So the wind still holds my longing, and my tears run to the sea, and the stars alone still whisper of a true love meant for me.
Wow. That is so beautiful, Rosana.
Oh, thank you.
It sounds like it should be in a Broadway play, like the song right before intermission, that gets people in that perfect mood to want to hear more later.
Yeah. Oh, I've never thought of that in that kind of setting, but I know what you mean. It is a part of a story for sure.
Yeah, because you want to come back after you've had some peanuts and a martini, and find out what happens to this woman and her love, right?
I know. What happened? I thought it was going to work out.
Now, you were the first woman to join the jazz faculty at University of North Texas, and you were the first vocalist to get a master's degree in their jazz studies program. I mean, what was going on years ago? Were they not into jazz, or they just have a lot of male crooners sitting around?
Well, North Texas is a legendary program in that it's the first program to ever offer a degree in jazz studies. You could major in like dance band music, at the time, and jazz studies, and that was a brand new thing in 1947. So their program was really built on instrumental studies, and particularly big band studies. And then it sort of evolved from there, and now we have a thriving vocal jazz department and a thriving small group combo department. It sort of took someone to take an interest in writing for vocals and in introducing a vocal component to the program. And so it was the big band arranging professor, Paris Rutherford, who really created the groundwork for a degree in jazz voice. So the degree was fairly new when I was an undergrad there. I didn't get a degree in jazz voice. I wasn't really singing yet at that time. I was still a French horn player, so my first degree is in classical theory and French horn. But I joined the jazz choir just on a lark, just because someone said it was fun and anyone can audition and that kind of thing. And so I met some of the first graduates of that vocal jazz component to the jazz degree, and I wanted to learn more. And so I went ahead and pursued a master's. I had to take a lot of leveling courses, and learn a lot of things I didn't learn in my first degree because it was not in jazz. But then, they didn't know what to do with me. Oh, we've never really had a singer do the master's thing yet. We just hadn't gotten there. There had been graduate people, but they had majored in music ed with a focus on jazz or something like that. So this was a little bit new territory. So that was kind of neat. And so then when I graduated, they said, well, gosh, I guess it's time to get a private teacher officially in jazz voice. I mean, I think this program is really growing. So how about you?
Yeah,
you just
got any plans?
got any plans? You want to hang out? And I thought, oh, how wonderful. This is awesome.
And you had not been a singer prior to showing up at University of North Texas?
I know. It's kind of weird. I had sung in a group with my parents. They sang a lot of barbershop harmony.
Uh-huh.
And so I had sung harmony with them. But I hadn't taken lessons. I hadn't been in choir in school or anything like that. And so what I learned was just singing with my family, basically, and reading from French horn. I learned how to read from that experience and also from playing horn. So I was a very good reader, and I knew how to sing harmony and hold my part. But I had no experience singing as a soloist, not really. So that was a brand new thing. It was really and I didn't know about jazz very much, although my parents, they were listening to some hip music, really good harmony music like Sergio Mendes and Brazil 66.
Mm-hmm.
And, my dad would listen to Glenn Miller records, and they would listen to the Four Freshmen and the Letterman, people who harmonized. I heard a lot of harmony growing up and some jazz things, a lot of Latin music. So I just loved the sound when I got to hear it. When I got to North Texas, it was everywhere. All my friends were in jazz band. It was just, I couldn't get away from it, and I loved it so much I wanted to learn more. So, I had to start the journey as a singer, as a late bloomer, as a solo singer, and I put it into high gear, and I worked my tail off.
Now, here we are a couple decades later. Have any of your students gone on to produce jazz albums or start touring themselves?
Oh, absolutely. So many of them. That's mostly what they do. They leave and they become artists, and they write their own music, and they produce their own records, and they tour, and it's definitely a component. We really try to give students a well-rounded education so that they can have what we call a life in music. So, if you can do a lot of different things and be very versatile, then you can say yes to a lot of opportunities, whether it be touring as a solo singer or singing backup for somebody else, or writing music or publishing music or creating a music library or, teaching. I mean, whatever opportunity might land in your lap. Singing for Cirque du Soleil. I mean, you just never know. There's so much music everywhere. I got into the studio scene here in Dallas, and that's been an incredible schooling and opportunity for me. And I still sing in the studio world here, and it's just been an amazing aspect to my career outside of the live singing and teaching.
This next song, which is really one of my favorites, sounds like it's right out of the 1940s. You're going to think, hey, didn't Ella Fitzgerald record this one? Or Shirley Bassey or Julie London? But you would be wrong. This new jazz standard, Perfectly Delivered, was written in the early 2000s by Rosana and her husband, Gary Eckert. Here she is with I Know I've Seen This Thing Before.
I know I've seen this thing before. Evermore it's just the same. Love's a losing game, but now I know that love was in disguise. For my eyes have opened wide. When I look inside, it's like a lovely day to warm those clouds away. Funny how from winter gloom comes spring in bloom. I know I've seen this thing before. Now I'll never see this thing the same way again. I know that I have seen this thing before. Evermore it's just the same. Love's a losing game, but now I know that love was in disguise. For my eyes have opened wide. When I look inside, it's like a lovely day to warm clouds away. Funny how from winter gloom comes a little spring in bloom. I know that I've seen this thing before. Now I'll never see this thing the same way again. Seen this thing before, and I'll never see this thing. Oh, the joy that love can bring. I'll never see this thing the same way again.
That is lovely, Rosana.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, how can people find you on the internet and learn more about you and your music?
Well, I do have a website, rosanaeckert.com. My name is spelled Rosana, so it has one of everything, and then Eckert.
Eckert, okay.
Eckert. Well, this has been just charming. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And for inspiring young musicians.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Wendy Robineau and Don Beskin, and by Angela Roll, your special real estate agent for Modernist Houses. Okay, Tom, take us out.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to our past shows, discover documentation of 8,000 significant modernist houses, and access 3 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced at Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Rogue archivist Carrie Cesarino researches our guest while juggling 9 above-average children, 7 of them not her own, 3 chickens, and her shockingly handsome husband Adam, who always knows when to put the lime in the coconut.
And shake it all up. Yes.
U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back soon with another sustainable tiny house edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.